It's an honor and a privilege to be your commencement speaker today. Accepting the invitation from Dean Steele, I decided to consult my oldest and one of my dearest friends, since he had served as the president of 4 Canadian universities and chairman of the board of a 5th. I thought that he had listened to many commencement speeches and delivered a few of his own. So over a Guinness one afternoon, I said, "George, what advice could you give me?" He paused, leaned over, spoke softly, and here's what he said. A commencement speaker is like a body at an Irish wake. The organizers need you for the party and don't expect you to say much. Well, I intend to follow my good friend's advice and talk briefly about how my life was changed following a taxicab ride that I took more than 40 years ago. However, before recounting this story, let me preface my remarks with a few details that don't appear in my bio or my curriculum vitae. They provide a context for the important lesson I learned on my taxicab ride. Elliot Eisner speaks of career planning as an oxymoron. Others speak of professional careers as a happenstance or just plain luck. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're both right. And one of my 3 sons, then 6, at the dinner table one evening, he said, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be a baseball player." "What do you want to be when you grow down?" Now, how prophetic that question was. Since retiring, my height has shrunk 2 inches, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do next. My professional career certainly had a life of its own. As a 16-year-old, I walked across the stage at Hannibal High School in Hannibal, Missouri, the boyhood home of Mark Twain, to receive my high school diploma. Having received first place in the state for a news story I had written for the school newspaper, which I also edited, I intended to go to the University of Missouri and study in the School of Journalism and become a reporter. To offset my expenses, I worked one summer in a shoe factory, the heel and sole press rooms, and another summer as a Gandhi dancer, an occupation immortalized in a song titled "The Gandhi Dancer's Ball." Well, believe me, it was no ball. During the day, we laid railroad tracks in the hot Missouri sun, shoveled gravel, drove spikes and set railroad ties. At night, when we wanted to rest, we slept in boxcars on a railroad siding. And you know, the closest I came to journalism school was to marry one of its graduates, Marjorie Ann Pollock, who became the reporter in the family. Now let me turn briefly to that fateful taxicab ride and the lesson I learned that had a profound effect on my life. The lesson I learned concerns choices. Every choice involves a sacrifice for oneself and for others. That statement is hardly profound, however, the consequences are. Oftentimes, we are so blinded by our wants and desires that we ignore the sacrifices inherent in the choices we make. My work in the shoe factory and later as a Gandhi dancer led me to appreciate that everyone, regardless of their station in life, has something to offer if you bother to listen. So quite naturally, when I flagged a cab down in Chicago one day, I initiated a conversation with the taxicab driver. And here's what he said. I wanted a nice home for my family in the city, a summer home on Lake Michigan, and a car for my wife and each of my 2 children. Well, we had the nice home, the summer home on Lake Michigan, and cars for everyone in the family. My wife divorced me, and my children would have nothing to do with me. I got what I wanted, but I lost what I had. And what I had was far more important to me than what I wanted. This cabbie, fine man that he was so blinded by his desires and wants that he failed to consider the sacrifices for his family and for himself. And sadly, in my experience, this is an all too common mistake. Equally sad, if I had been riding in that same cab today, I wouldn't have learned that valuable lesson. Why? Instead, I would have been talking on my cell phone, surfing on the net on my smartphone, texting, or doing what my grandchildren do all the time, tweeting. Now, in light of this cabbie story, let me ask each of you in the audience and on stage, I'm not letting you off the hook, 2 questions. What are the 3 or 4 most important things in your life? And secondly, what are the sacrifices that you are unwilling to make, no matter what the choice is or the opportunity? These are tougher questions to answer than you might think, and even more difficult to act upon. I know. Not too long after the cabbie told me his story, I created a mental list of the things in life that meant the most to me. And this list exerted a major influence over my choices for the rest of my professional career. Number one on my list was my family, sitting over there in the front row. Number two was my students, teaching and advising included. And number three, my research and writing on practical problems. No matter how controversial they were, and I have a few, or whether they were valued by members of the Academy. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, it should have added a fourth: my own personal health. With all due respects to my former deans, faculty reports and faculty meetings didn't make my list. Well, thanks to that cabbie, I can enter the checkout line when my time comes with few regrets. I am not estranged from my 4 children. My wife and I like and love each other. I have students who continue to care about me, and I continue to care about them. And I have several friends who are close enough that they are willing to share with one another their innermost feelings and thoughts. But strangely, the more attention I paid to the sacrifices I was unwilling to make, the more professional recognition I received. At every Irish wake, it is customary to offer a toast to the body. Well, instead, let me offer a toast to this year's graduates. May you experience success, enjoy your journey, and end your life with few regrets, because you did not let your wants and desires blind you to the important sacrifices inherent in your choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, for those wonderful remarks. I think they got to all of us. I really appreciate that on this day. Our next